brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the City of Eau Claire. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
We will call this meeting to order. Welcome to the June 15th, 2020 meeting of the Eau Claire Plan Commission. This meeting is being broadcast live by Valley Media Works on Charter Channel 994, WRFP-LP 101.9 FM, and online at valleymediaworks.org. The Plan Commission attempts to conduct its public hearings in a relatively informal manner within the constraint that we must deal with the issues before us in an orderly and businesslike fashion. We give the applicant an opportunity to speak first, and then others, either for or against the proposal, are each permitted to speak once. We have one item on today's agenda for a public hearing, which is item number 3. The rest are public discussion. We do request that everyone restrict their comments to the issues before us, avoid unnecessary repetition, and be prudent in the use of time. We want to be sure that we have adequate time to review and discuss all items with equal diligence. And just as a reminder, please, for those of you in the room, make sure your phones are off or silent. And for those of you who are going to be speaking, when you're off mute, please try to avoid distractions in the background. So with that, we'll begin the meeting, and we'll start with a roll call. Commissioner Christopherson.
Here.
Prosnick.
Here.
Seymour.
Here.
Brunholt.
Here.
Granlund.
Here.
Wolfgram.
Here.
Obeyed.
Here.
And I thought I saw Commissioner Gregor down here earlier. There he is. Commissioner Gregor, are you with us?
Yeah, I just got kicked. I'm back.
Okay, we can hear you. And Mr. Larson is here. Any additions or corrections to the minutes from our June 1st, 2020 meeting? Seeing none, without objection, the minutes are approved. Item number 3 is our first and only public hearing for recommendation to the City Council to recommend approval of the CIP or Capital Improvement Plan for the City of Eau Claire for 2021 through 2025 or 6? Is it for 2025 or 2026?
2025.
2025, okay. It says on here it says 26. Okay.
Plus or minus.
Mr. Allen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Apologies we tested everything but the clicker. Now it's working. All right, thank you. All right, very good, thank you. Yes, apologize for the error on the documents. That does remind me, it is important to note that the CIP does cover, which again, CIP being the Capital Improvement Plan, does cover the period 2021 to 2025. The planning horizon, however, is actually 2021 to 2030. So there are several large capital investments beyond 2025 that inform the current capital planning. So although the kind of budgeting numbers are trying to be more specific through to 2025, it is really looking at, again, being capital projects that have a lot longer lifespan, looking at a larger kind of planning horizon, much like the comprehensive plan does. And with that, the comprehensive plan is the purpose for the connection here to the Plan Commission with regards to the CIP for this year and each year around this time. The responsibility of the Plan Commission this evening is to determine that the CIP is consistent with the comprehensive plan. A motion is in order after the conclusion of presentation any testimony from the public and discussion amongst the commission. Again, a motion is in order to declare the CIP consistent with the comprehensive plan, and then that will be forwarded on to the city council for their consideration. So with that, just real quick highlight of some of the items I will be highlighting this evening. This is one of those opportunities where a financial document is handed over to planners in the Plan Commission, so we have opportunity to look at how the two integrate more strategically than you might see with kind of a standard annual budget. So again, this is the bigger picture approach, making sure that things align with objectives, not just with the city's kind of strategic plan, but also the overall comprehensive plan that you are responsible for as well. So I highlighted a few of the specific kind of funds or chapters within the draft. Again, this is still proposed or draft CIP that I wanted to highlight here moving forward. Again, these are specific. We can talk about other funds or other chapters if there's interest in that or questions about those. I should note that I believe Christine Basom from the Finance Department is available on the line if there are more specific kind of budgeting and financial questions. With that, again, some of the items I'll be highlighting include parking improvements, public transit, land, building, and equipment, and that's where a lot of the community development department items may land. Transportation improvements, parks and recreation, and TID 13, which is the Cannery District. There are a number of comprehensive plan chapters that do tie in very specifically with these chapters or funds within the CIP. Some of those that I've identified include Chapter 2, the Transportation Plan, Chapter 3, Public Utilities, Chapter 4, Parks, Chapter 10, Housing, and Chapter 12, Community Facilities. Community facilities being things like fire stations and such. So here we are. It looks a little bit out of order. The way things are progressing, here we are June 15th before you for the CIP. But there are other additional commission reviews yet to come. Transit Commission is this Wednesday. Parks and Waterways Commission is next Wednesday. And then after that, it'll go forward to the City Council for their first meeting in July. So considering that we do not anticipate having a first meeting in July due to the Independence Day holiday, that's why you're seeing this here at this point rather than yet in July, which might be more standard in other years. Probably hard to read some of this, but these are the different kind of department summaries or fund summaries with all the different totals. The total for next year's projects look to be just short of $41 million. It's pretty standard. It's kind of a up and down throughout each subsequent year, anywhere around from 28 to 38 million each year, with 41 being slated for next year. That's pretty typical to see kind of the nearer horizon projects have a little bit more specificity and therefore typically would be a higher number unless there are larger projects anticipated of larger scale later on. The total is just shy of $175 million for all 5 years. And now just to kind of jump through some of these specific projects. Again, these are all within the proposed CIP that was online. And I can kind of walk through things here more specifically. Just wanted to highlight some of those that are more, again, relevant to the Plan Commission, comprehensive plan in general. Before we get started in that, just a reminder, capital projects within the capital improvement plan, CIP, is deemed as such when the end product holds a value of at least $5,000 and possesses a useful life of greater than 1 year. So that can be a lot of different things. It could be such things as software, all the way to actual buildings and street projects. So wide range of projects. Every municipality or community can kind of set that bar a little differently. That's where we are here in Eau Claire. So some of these, here's the first one I just wanted to emphasize. That's kind of a key one moving forward, especially in the near years. Starting next year is the Jeffers Road project near the North Crossing. And again, this was identified by WSDOT as being eligible for some additional funds and is moving forward starting next year. I just highlighted it both. It's in the Transportation Fund as well as Stormwater Fund. Again, this has come up more specifically here with some recent projects, including one even tonight off Prairie Lane, where again, this future improvement really ties into some of the projects that you've already been seeing here even tonight. Parking, this is one that does come up quite a bit in nearly every project, particularly multifamily residential projects. Not to steal away from anything from the 2019 parking study, but there are a lot of recommended projects and improvements within that, and that's what you're seeing here with some of these parking projects. The one that's a little bit further out is the bottom one, talking about downtown structured parking. And again, that's really looking forward to replacement for the Gibson ramp adjacent to near City Hall here, as well as a design of a Madison Street ramp. And that's more geographically towards the Mayo or Luther campus downtown, kind of in that general area. So there's some potential redevelopment slated in that area, not just with a future potential parking ramp, perhaps coinciding with that campus, but also coinciding with a fire station relocation as well. And that's another project identified here. Transit, obviously it ties into comprehensive plan and future planning projects. Electric charging infrastructure in particular, looking at converting long-term, again, these long-term projects, many of these, to more electric buses than the current diesel or hybrids. And then looking, again, longer term down the road, university transit hub and connecting with the university, especially with regards to future Sonotag Center and how that could be a unique transit option or service at that point. Land, buildings, and equipment, that's one of the larger funds in terms of number of projects, and this sees also the largest range of kind of funding amounts from small to extremely large. But some of these, again, just to highlight land acquisition reserve. So when you see city moving forward with purchasing some land for future projects, I'm not sure if roads really fall under this, but it's more the larger projects that relate to green space, open space, and such, particularly related to the comprehensive plan, waterways plan, and the parks plan. And then also investment in renewable energy. This has funding specified for each year to help the city meet the renewable energy goals, particularly those identified in the Renewable Energy Action Plan, which, as you know, is formally adopted as part of the comprehensive plan this year. Some others to highlight, participatory budgeting. That's a project that's still getting off the ground, was put on hold currently, just kind of on hiatus while we're working through all of our distancing and other pandemic-related kind of separation and inability to really get larger groups of stakeholders together to talk through participatory budgeting. But that is still slated and has some funding assigned to that in future years as well. Affordable housing, investments in affordable housing, that too saw some adjustments this last year when it came before you in terms of timing. And so the amounts are still very comparable for that full 5-year span, but some of those years have been adjusted. And again, we can hopefully answer some questions related to that if you have any specific to that type of project. Parks and Rec obviously has quite a bit of tie in with the comprehensive plan, particularly related to the new parks 5-year plan that was adopted last year. There's the Northwest Community Park, which was highly anticipated and one of the larger parks that was identified in the new plan, Parks and Open Space Plan, and that is slated for future acquisition and development. And then as well as the Princeton Valley Park, which was before Plan Commission with some new subdivision expansion in 2018 and 2019. So some additional funding slated in later years for some of the infrastructure kind of improvements and installations at that park. Just a couple more real quick. Trail improvements is related to TID 12. This also is related to the Sonotake Center project, just in terms of timing more than anything. And then improvements to that trail segment along the Chippewa River related again to that anticipated project down Menominee Street. And finally, I just wanted to highlight TID 13. This was, timing-wise, was right before the Plan Commission recommended adoption of the CIP last year. And the TID 13 came forward with the Cannery District improvements identified there. So this is more specificity related to that redevelopment plan that was recently accepted, as well as, again, just all the TID 13 anticipated expenses and projects related to that. So a little bit more specifics in the narrative here in terms of details related to actual park development, and then the same with the street improvements. The park development, a little bit longer timeline for that, but the street improvements we're looking to happen a lot more quickly, especially related to Oxford Avenue, Platt Street, and the intersections in that area. So with that, I just wanted to highlight some of the projects that relate more specifically to what the Plan Commission is overseeing through the comprehensive plan and other plans therein. And again, other than that, as you probably familiar with and aware, that a lot of the funds are also tied back to simply maintenance, which is perhaps less glamorous than some of these big new projects, but nonetheless still vitally important to way of life here in Eau Claire and any municipality for that matter when they look at capital improvement planning to make sure that maintaining the things that at one point were very glamorous and making sure that there's still maintained some level of glamour moving forward. So happy to answer any questions just in terms of timing and dollar amounts and project specifics as much as I can. Again, many thanks to Finance Department staff for each year putting together all the inputs from all the different departments. As you see, these are just a couple highlights from each of those different funds. And I didn't include all the funds even in the highlights or all the departments. So I'm sure I missed a few that you may want to talk about. But again, thanks to the Finance Department for putting together this overall plan to make it a budget balance as well moving forward with a lot of these projects too. So with that, I'll try to answer any questions.
Good, thank you. Are there any questions from the commission for staff? Okay. Looks like we have none. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a motion that's included in the, oh, I'm sorry. This is a public hearing. So if you are, I'm going to check first with the call-in users that are calling in by landline. I'm at a disadvantage here because I can't see names of people, but we have 5 people that have called in by landline. So I'm going to, and unfortunately the callers can't see what I'm seeing either. So I have call-in users 3 through 7. I'm going to check one at a time. It might require the call-in users to to speak, even though I can't hear you, but one of you I will be able to hear. So I'm going to unmute caller number 3. Caller number 3, are you calling to speak on this item, the capital improvement plan? It's okay to speak. All right, we have no one there.
See which caller I am.
Okay, I hear you. Hold on a second. Just so you know, you are caller number 4. Can you state your name and address, and are you here to speak on the capital improvement plan?
I am.
Okay.
It's caller number 3, isn't, I can't see the callers in what order.
Yeah.
The caller number 3 is not here to speak on that. I'm not sure if they're in the same, boat as I am, is not being able to tell.
Right. Just start with your name and address, please.
So my name is Kim Kronk, and I live at 1019 Hitch Boulevard here in Eau Claire.
Okay.
And full disclosure, I am on the Police and Fire Commission.
Okay.
And I'll try to keep my comments brief. Really, I'm speaking as a community member. I wanted to speak in particular to the potential for spending. It appears to be, and quote, please, if I'm misquoting this dollar amount, let me know. But it appears to be that $2,600,000 will be spent within policing equipment, cameras, and other perceived necessities over the next 5 years. And I just want to speak a little bit on the recent murder that we're all aware of George Floyd in Minneapolis, and the very strong condemning of that by the city, by our Eau Claire area school district, by the county internally, and other entities that have voiced strong concern for the practices and mispractices that are happening, not only in the Minneapolis Police Department, but across the country. I wanted to point out that as we are recovering from COVID-19, there are major stressors on budgets, both within the city, the county, the schools, our businesses. And so I think we need to be very mindful in how we're spending and how we're increasing budgets, not just within the city, but also within the county. I think that one of the concerns that I have with the spending is I'm not sure we're looking at the big picture as a taxpayer in this community. I try to look at the big picture of not only how much is the city spending on policing, but how much is being spent in our sheriff's department, in our jail, in our juvenile detention center, and all of the areas that are under the guise or under the umbrella of public safety. And with the recent determination that Eau Claire County is a high-intensity drug trafficking area, I'm not sure that we know the full total amount of money that's coming into our area for policing or public safety under the realm of policing and our jail facilities. I also wanted to point out that we have a shared services commission that tries to collaborate or has tried in the past between the city, the county, and our school district. And from what I can see, it does not seem that they have met since 2015. And I think when we start to look at how do we combine budgets, or how do we combine efficiencies, or how do we combine really building true equity within our city, county, our schools, our youth, I think that's something that we certainly need to consider. I've seen, as you probably have as well, I was at some of the rallies here, very peaceful rallies with lots of youth showing up to really voice their concerns about racism here in Oakland and in the county, and what they want to see happen. And I'm not sure with this particular capital improvement plan in this particular area that there's been enough community conversation and community input. And I realize that COVID-19 has hit everybody hard, but I would strongly say this is not the time to put participatory budgeting on hold. I think this is the time to actually go full on force with participatory budgeting, especially in this area. I wanted to state that in our local jail, we've seen between the population census for African Americans in our county is below 2%. However, the population of Black Americans, African Americans in our jail has covered between 17.71% and over 19%. Even within a 53% reduction in the jail population since March 1st, although there's probably been an uptick or ebbed and flowed. And there had also been an 89% reduction in bookings into the jail, which means that our police, due to COVID-19, were having to make very different decisions. I don't know what those very different decisions were, and when I look at the statistics of the jail, I'm not sure how much of those different decisions affected our Black and brown community members. When we talk about public safety and we talk about social determinants and how much we're spending on budget, which are more documents, I just want you to consider and think about, as I consider and think about too, what our social determinants, they're grouped into economic stability, which includes living wages, food security, safe and stable housing. It includes education, so good high school graduation rates, early education and development resources, language literacy. We talk about health care, so access to community-based primary emergency health care, health literacy, neighborhood and our environment. Do we have, accommodations for people with disabilities, transportation, crime prevention, healthy food, accessible workplaces, all the things that you consider when you're building a budget, you're building a capital improvement plan. We know that in every one of these areas, Black and brown members of our community and in our state fare way worse. And so that's what we see when we're seeing the rallies, when we're seeing the outcry for something different. And I have seen several at least one, if not more than one, city council members saying that this is the biggest issue that they have received communication about. And so to me, that means that the public wants to have the conversation. They want to collaborate and figure out what does public safety mean in our area. And that would include, obviously, further dialogue between the city, between the police, between the sheriff's department, because the left and the right hand always have to know what each other is doing. So in speaking today, my request, or my ask, my hope, is that some of these expenditures are going to be deferred until the community conversation with police. I would even say the sheriff's department, the county, the council, to not add to the budget, but to reallocate to community resources that are really going to improve social determinants and the holistic health for everybody in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission for Ms. Kronk? Okay, I see none. Thank you for calling. We appreciate your input.
Thank you.
And now I have unmuted what on my screen is call-in user number 5. But if you're calling by telephone, please identify yourself. If you're calling by landline, please identify yourself. Okay, we'll move on to the next call-in user. Well, actually, I've got someone with their hand up here. So, let's see. Mr.
Hello, can you hear me?
Mr. Carlson, can you hear me? Dave Carlson?
Yes, that's me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Are you, did you?
Okay, my name is Greg. I was gonna comment, I was gonna follow Kim Cronk's comment,
Okay,
kind of concerning the same thing.
okay. What's your address, sir?
All right, 2212 Altoona Avenue.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
4701.
Okay,
So I wanted to second everything that Kim Cronk said, and then I wanted to touch on a couple other things as well myself. I served as one of the 128, Bravo Company, one of the 128, 32nd Infantry Division, so the Red Arrow Division. I was deployed to Iraq in 2004. I was looking through the budget for the police department, and I saw things like tactical robot, different equipment for a rangefinder, rifles, different things like that. And I agree with the fact that things need to be put to the side, and this needs to be combed through, because when I went in 2004, some of you may recall, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld said you go to war with what you have. That was the base that I convoyed out of, and we had steel welded onto our vehicles, sandbags on the floor, and Kevlar blankets to protect us from IED. So I'm not saying that it needs to be to that extent, but also at the same time, I am a person having served in the military, and I was a sergeant on my second tour. I know that units ask for a lot more than they need, because in the military, the expectation is you're not going to get a quarter of what you ask for. Well, in this case, this seems as if this is voted on preemptively. They're going to get what they're asking for, and I'm not sure that all of this is necessary. So that's my first concern. My second concern, I work for Milkweed Connections. I contract with the Comprehensive Community Services, so county level. But how this relates to the city is when I respond to crisis events with individuals that I'm working with, a lot of times these crisis events are escalated by the fact that law enforcement shows up. So I've had several different events where I would be the one, there would be 3 to 4 or 5 cops there, or law enforcement officers there, and I would be the one that ended up walking this person out of the situation. So, and it has nothing to do with, I'm just gonna say that in all good faith, that the officers were, trying to do their job to the best of their ability. But we have to also take into consideration the fact that officers carry guns, officers wear interceptor body armor. Officers come, their appearance is combative. And for a lot of people who have had traumatic past, officers are part of that trauma, or law enforcement is part of that trauma, especially in the black and brown communities. So this is my second point, that a lot of the calls and a lot of the things that officers are responding to, I think are things that we need to sit down as a community and talk about before all of this funding goes through, and that the officers end up being the only one that can respond, because we have not refunded other areas that could have been people that were called or professionals that were called in response instead of the officers. My third point, funds to other areas. So we have investment, 434025, investment in affordable housing, 550,000. But you have around 2,800,000 going to the police department. So I think that this is very weighted the wrong direction, when housing is a critical need for so many people in the community, especially affordable housing within the black and brown community here in Eau Claire County. I also saw a couple other things that concerned me a little bit. One, and I'm gonna piggyback off of what Kim Cronk said about the high-intensity drug trafficking area designation that Eau Claire County just got. I saw that in the forensic lab, the city pays for 45% of the lab, yet the county the sheriff's department uses the lab. So the sheriff's department has new funding coming in, and it could be in the amount of $2.25 million. That's what's been released so far to the Western District of Wisconsin from the Community-Oriented Policing Services agency under the Department of Justice at the federal level. We don't know how much funding is coming in, but Sheriff Kramer commented himself that there could be funding for the next 10 years. So why is the city paying for 45% of a lab that the sheriff's department also uses and pays less for? Also, the criminal Criminal Investigation Division is also part of the West Central Drug Task Force. The West Central Drug Task Force is most likely the organization that will be getting these funds. And they also use the forensic lab. So once again, why is the city paying for 45% of that lab? These are all details that need to be combed through before this is brought to vote, I believe, and the community needs to have a say in this as well. So I'll end it there, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Any questions from the commission for Mr. Carlson? I see none. Thank you for calling in. Let's see. Then we will try another telephone caller. Please, if you're calling in by landline, can you speak now? All right, that was call-in user number 6, and we get no response. Oop. Okay. I'm now on call-in user number 7, and I know that the people that are calling in by landline don't see that menu, so you won't know if you're calling user number 7. So that's why I ask, if you're calling in by phone now, by landline, just give us a shout so we can tell if you might be call-in user number 7. One more time, if you're calling in by landline, please speak now. Okay. The rest of the people on the menu here are all identified by name, and you should be able to raise your hand. There should be a little icon to raise your hand if you want to speak. All right, well, I hope we didn't miss someone who wanted to speak. I can't think of any other way to solicit the landline users.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I don't know if they are calling in specifically on a landline. They may be calling in from their cell phone through the access code. So I'm not sure.
Okay, I've got 3 different icons here. One is an actual telephone receiver.
Okay.
And then there's the headset, which I think is the computer, and then there's a little icon that looks like a cell phone.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that may be, yeah, we're completely at your discretion.
All right. Well, I think I've done the best I can.
No, I appreciate it. No, I was asking Mr. Petrie, he can't view it either, so no, appreciate the effort there.
Okay.
That's more callers than we normally get, so.
Yeah.
That's understood that we may have folks just calling in to listen, and that's certainly fine as well. But
okay. And I see no more hands raised. But so we have a motion. We've listened to staff, had an opportunity to ask questions of them. We've listened to the public, and we have a motion before us that's in the packet. It's a printed motion that needs to be signed by the mover and seconder. So it'd be best if we could get somebody to move and second in the room. Is there a motion to approve? Commissioner Christopherson.
Thank you, Chairman. I move that the capital improvement plan be placed on the agenda for council consideration.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Commissioner Prosnick. All right, discussion among the commission. We'll start with Commissioner Wolfgram.
Thank you, Chairperson Larson. I ask that my comments be recorded in the minutes, please. Our community spoke on May 31st, June 4th, and June 5th, and then again this past Saturday. They have continued to speak by contacting their city council members in previously unseen numbers. And community leaders as well as myself have been contacted about wanting to engage in a conversation with the police department, city manager, and city council about a plan of relocation of resources from the police and sheriff's department into community resources. Then again, today as well as on June 2nd, both Matt Rokas, Chief of Police, and Dale Peters, City Manager, stated that they prioritize earning the trust of all residents and welcome opportunities to strengthen relationships with our community. Trust is realized when we work together as a community to solve problems, ensure safety and security, and make Eau Claire a better place for all. This is one of those opportunities. And this is not about taking a side. The side is working together as a community, a partnership, all committed to proactively creating a community that acknowledges racism at every systemic level, working to address the social and economic disparities, and striving for all of our neighbors to be able to thrive. On June 9th, our City Council passed a resolution denouncing the murder of George Floyd and all forms of brutality, racism, hatred, and bigotry. From my perspective, a resolution is an organic, living document demonstrated in action. I understand that this is uncomfortable, but change only occurs in the discomfort zone. One value that stands out in Eau Claire, which motivates me to be involved in city government, is the value that is placed on civic engagement. Therefore, I cannot vote to move this motion forward as is when my stewardship prioritizes commitment to our community members who are clearly demonstrating that they seek input before any further funding to our police and sheriff's department is approved. I am moving to amend the motion. I sent the preliminary wording of the motion to Mr. Allen and Mr. Petrie just before the start of the meeting. Thank you. I can read the amendment to the motion if you'd like.
Yes, please do. Thank you.
I move that the 2021-25 capital improvement plan presented as the document on file in the office of the city clerk and open to public inspection during normal business hours is consistent with the comprehensive plan and recommend approval thereof. And this is the part that I'm adding. Understanding that before the city council votes on approval, that it is expected there will be a community engagement session on the CIP, guided by our city's black and brown leaders and collaborating with Chief of Police Matt Rokas, City Manager Dale Peters, and Council President Terry Weld. That's the end of my amendment.
Okay. I wish I had a copy of that in front of me.
Sure, I can put it on the screen.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Is there a second? Was that Commissioner Gregor?
That's right.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to amend the original motion. Is there discussion on this amendment? Commissioner Gregor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Commissioner Wolfgram for this motion. I'm able to speak a bit before the meeting tonight about the dialogue that I think is necessary. We've been getting a lot of feedback as a city council, and I think there's been a lot of folks throughout the community looking for opportunities to make a difference, and I think ICIP is a space, to talk about priorities and get down to specifics as to how we can, really take a look at our priorities in a more real way, I guess you could say, in terms of spending, in terms of what some new opportunities may be as well. I do also want to note that the City Council, we decided to take a bit more time on this, and in fact, Mr. Allen mentioned the timeline, but it's been amended a little bit to give to have the CIP go in front of the City Council for a public hearing on July 27th, and then a vote on adoption on July 28th. So we're giving ourselves, or pushed that back a bit. So I think this motion is realistic that a meeting, community engagement session of this sort could occur before a City Council vote, so that more dialogue can occur before approval. So I'll be supporting that.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Brenholt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Based upon the public comments and also the comments by Commissioner Wolfgram and Commissioner Gregor, I too share a concern that there may be budget items or capital improvement items that have not been, should we say, adjusted or reflective of the events nationally and locally in the past 3 weeks. So I do believe there's additional dialogue that needs to occur before this is passed and moved forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Prosnick.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to speak up and say that I also agree with the amendment that was presented. I think just based on some of the changes that have happened of recent in the community and based on the comments tonight, that it is something that has to be taken into consideration. See if there is, just maybe better ways that the money can be allocated to help the community as a whole going through these times that I don't think too many people were expecting that we'd be going through. So I just want to thank Susan Wolfgram for bringing that up, and I definitely support this.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Christofferson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really grateful that this conversation is taking place early on in the conversation about the capital improvement plan. It was my understanding that a public announcement was made today about a task force forming around this particular issue, and asking that the community begin to talk about the plans and the culture that we want to bring forward. I just want to bring around that there was also 2,000 signatures asking for purchase and investment in body cameras, something that has been requested by the community over the last 3 years and has continued to move forward in the capital improvement plan. So this will, again, bring that into consideration. But the things that are in the capital improvement plan are all capital improvements. They're things that have a value of $5,000 or more in a lifespan of, I believe Mr. Allen said 5 years. So that a number of the things that would also increase the safety and sustainability of our community would not pertain to this money. And this money is also things that we borrow for and would not be movable into other parts of our budget. So I just want some of that to be part of our conversation, knowing that not all of this money that you're seeing would automatically go to something else. But I do want to bring back Ms. Cronk's comment about the really open and vigorous coordination between the taxing authorities, the county and the school districts and the city. And I think that strengthening that communication would certainly be an addition. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the commission? Commissioner Wolfgram, your hand is up. Did you have something else to add?
No, my apologies.
Okay. Any other comments from the commission on the amendment before us? All right, I see none, so we will call the roll on the amendment. Commissioner Prosnick.
Aye.
Christofferson.
Aye.
Seymour.
Aye.
Brenholt.
Aye.
Granlund.
Aye.
Gregor.
Aye.
Wolfgram.
Aye.
Obeyed.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And that motion passes. We have before us the amended motion. And is there any further discussion about that? I see none. So we will call the roll. Commissioner Prosnick.
Aye.
Christofferson.
Aye.
Seymour.
Aye.
Brenholt.
Aye.
Granlund.
Aye.
Gregor.
Aye.
Wolfgram.
Aye.
Obeyed.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. With that, item number 1 passes. And we are on to item number 2. I'm sorry, that was item number 3. Got to get used to the roll call thing being first. Item number 4 is a public discussion for recommendation to City Council to recommend approval of a final plat at west of County Road F, north of Aspen Ridge Drive. Mr. Allen.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Again, before you this evening, yes, this is item number, what are we on? 4? Thank you. I'll get used to it as well. Item number 4, as you see the map here, far northwest corner of the map, west side of northwest corner, as it were, of Eau Claire. This is a request to approve the final plat for Walnut Grove first phase, so Walnut Grove 1, located north of Aspen Ridge Drive, west of County Road F, for both single-family and twin home development. More specifically, this is Walnut Grove 1, which is strictly for twin home development. The area in question is more or less 18 acres, all told. There's zoning of both R1 and R2P in the overall project. Kind of cut this out from the rezoning that was before you a short time ago. To the north was rezoned to R1. To the south, that's the portion essentially before you here this evening. This is the R2P portion for the twin homes. Again, the applicant is looking to rezone, not rezone, sorry, final plat what was previously rezoned, Walnut Grove 1. Again, the property was approved for annexation by City Council back in January, and then the rezoning went forward in April. The Planning Commission did approve the preliminary plat back in March. The overall project proposes 89 lots, 61 lots for single-family development. This is shown as Outlot 3, which is, oh, we lost the label. That's at the top of the screen there. I tried to cut and zoom into this. Thank you, Mr. Petrie. At the top there, kind of large blank space is Outlot 3. That is for a future single-family development of 61 lots. To the south is really what you're seeing laid out here for this final plat phase. That would be 28 lots or 14 structures for twin home development. The proposal is similar to existing Aspen Meadows subdivision located to the southwest. You see a little bit kind of faded in there. Jump back here. You can see kind of the mix to the west and the south. A little bit inverted, but similar kind of scale and design in terms of twin homes in the south end and then single family to the north. The final plat shows the proposed layout of the streets and lots for this first phase. Primary access is to the extension of Caden Court onto County Road F. That went forward for annexation. There's a piece that was still in the town of Wheaton that was then annexed in and is adjacent now to Outlot 1, as you see there, along County Road F. So that was just brought before City Council at their meeting last week. Secondary access is into that existing Aspen Ridge Drive to the south. And final site plans will be staff reviewed for these twin homes prior to building permits being issued for each. Developers agreement was also before the City Council last week. And that was conditionally approved by the council, and again is awaiting the final plat here. The agenda item will be considered by City Council at its June 23rd meeting next week. And again, additional phases such as that Outlot 3 for the single family development will require certainly additional final plat approvals. So with that, again, there's a brief narrative provided to you by the applicant, and hopefully you're able to zoom in a little bit better than I was here with this first phase of Walnut Grove. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission for staff? I see none. Thank you.
Thank you.
And do you know who I should call on as the applicant?
It is Real Land Serving is the applicant.
Mr. Gartman rose his hand, so.
That may very well be the case, indeed.
All right.
Yes.
Mr. Gartman, do you hear me?
Yes?
Okay. Speak away. You're the applicant on this item?
Now, the plat before you has basically been approved with a preliminary plat. I'm here answering questions about it, so
Okay.
I will just leave it to you guys.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Gartman? I see none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Make sure he's... All right. Is there a motion from the commission to move this item?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Prosnick.
Second.
Commissioner Seymour.
Second, thank you.
Any discussion? I see none. So we will call the roll. Commissioner Prosnick,
Aye.
Christofferson,
Aye.
Seymour,
Aye.
Brenholt,
Aye.
Granlund,
Aye.
Gregor,
Aye.
Wolfgram,
Aye.
Obeyed,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. That item passes. Congratulations. Item number 5 is a public discussion for approval by the Plan Commission to approve an amendment for a site plan for Associated Bank at 2425 London Road. Mr. Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Good evening. Number 5 and number 6, the next two items are adjacent to each other. both redevelopment projects along London Road, noted on the screen. The first project was reviewed by this commission and approved last year in August for a single story. The applicant has just changed their plans. That single story was 3,600 square feet. Now Associated Bank is proposing a two-story, 8,500 square foot bank branch with offices on the second floor. Attached in your packet is the new site plan as shown on the screen. The site plan did add some parking. It did add more than double the square footage of the building. The architecture of the building we'll get to in a little bit, but it's the same glass tower architectural building with a higher roof pitch now, or higher ceiling height and overall height. The drive-through lane, as noted, is 3 for customers shown on the site plan. The far northern lane is for an ATM machine. They are proposing a bypass lane for the drive up to the north, a cross-access, shared parking with the neighbor to the north as well. Access would be shared with the neighbor to the south and to the north. This used to be the Halloween Express store in 2019. Before that was the Bargain City store, and way before that was the Hancock Fabric Building and Northwest Fabric Building. The landscape plan, as shown, does add significant amount of greenscaping to the site. If you remember, they took down the site that was existing there, but before it was just a building and a parking lot, so they will be adding a significant amount of greenscape to the site. In their narrative, they did correct it on Friday, but it wasn't too late for the packet to get in there. But they have revised their narrative for 1 parking spot for every 300 square feet. The parking requirement is 28. They are showing 35 stalls. My understanding, they'll have 23 employees at this site, but if they have a staff meeting with the surrounding areas, they will have significant more employee parking, and the rest would be for guests or customers. They also are proposing a shared parking with the next site plan to the north, which is Panda Express. Bicycle parking is noted on the site plan. I'll get to the elevations now, showing the glass architecture with brick. They are doing you see the drive-through lanes for the customers. And they're also doing a brick on the side along with the glass, the 2-story building, and then the glass tower part where with the sign is 42 feet tall. There is a few conditions that need to be met in the report. A certified survey map with the 2 lots showing, there's another architecture feature. This is the old site plan, obviously. The building has been removed, but they are redoing the lot lines with the tenant to the north. So that will be required a certified survey map prior to getting a building permit. In your report is the grading and drainage, utilities, and traffic. Currently, last time we discussed the sidewalk, and that will be discussed tonight as well probably. But there is an existing sidewalk gap in between London Road and Claremont Avenue, this parcel and to the parcel to the north. Currently, there is no crossing on London Road at Claremont Avenue for pedestrians. Also, there is no sidewalk east of Claremont along the site and heading to the east under South Hastings Way. You can see the sidewalks on the north side, and then there's along with going north or going east and west. So that is a little more challenging for pedestrians to get across. If you're crossing at Milwaukee Burger Company, heading to this site, it will be a little more challenging for pedestrians. That is noted in the report and is added a condition. With that being said, I'd be happy to answer any questions this evening.
Good, thank you. Commissioner Christopherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering, in the packet, you recommended the bypass lane be 10 feet instead of 12. Was that something also that the...
Yes, the reason being, we believe that most of the customers will be coming off of London Road, accessing the site, and then coming up to the drive-through. At 19 feet, that is not technically 2 ways, and at 19 feet, that would be a car and a half, so it should be reduced down to slow down the traffic through the parking lot if they want to access the Panda Express. We believe 10 feet is still wide enough for customers to get through both sides, but it would be a one-way. We are recommending an arrow to be added as well to that site.
Was there conversation with the project owner about that, or has that not, you've not heard any response from them on that point?
We did send them preliminary comments. I'm not sure if that one made it in there, but the applicant, I believe, is on the line. We can ask him that question as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other questions from the commission? Commissioner Gregor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been noted that there's bike parking on the site plan, but I just can't seem to find it, and I'm told it's like right in the front of the building. Is there like a particular symbol or abbreviation thing?
Yeah, excellent question. So they're noted 2 bicycle parking racks in front, right next to the sidewalk connection, next to the building, in the front along London Road. You might not be able to read it, but it is noted if you zoom in on the site plan.
Okay. I think I have a follow-up question kind of related to the site plan. All right. Different topic a little bit, but I noticed that if you zoom in on the kind of this east-west, like pedestrian circulation block. The curb cut doesn't really line up with the other curb cut that you look at that parking lot there. So I'm assuming that could be a condition of approval that we could add into this to just make sure that lines up so there's more continuity. All right.
Yes, excellent question. So I have the mouse. I don't know if you can see that on your screen, but here's where it's noted as 2 bicycle parking stalls in front of the building as you enter. Do you see that now?
Yeah, on mine where I can see it more clearly.
Yeah, not a problem. What Commissioner Gregor is talking about, as you head down this sidewalk, he's noting that as you cross this driveway, the sidewalk is not lined up with the sidewalk. You actually have to go more on an angle. And his condition would be to approve with condition that it would connect straight across and then jog down to get to Mall Drive. Is that my understanding?
Yeah,
Is that
that's correct? That was my concern.
Okay. Yeah, that would be an added condition if the commission approves it.
all right? Are there? Did you have any other follow-up, Commissioner Gregor?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Petrie.
Any other questions from the commission for staff? Commissioner Christopherson? Oh, that's right. Okay, I see none. I'm going to call on Mr. Kerr here. Mr. Kerr, are you the applicant?
I am the applicant. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the planning commissioners for giving us time this evening to appear before you. Just wanted to respond quickly to the two items that were brought up. The reduction of the bypass lane to 10 feet. We take no issue with that. And also the adjustment of the curb cut to align with the sidewalks. We also take no issue with that. We have to comply with both of those conditions. But what we typically do is do an angled crosswalk, because honestly that's how people cross anyway. But if you prefer to have those curb cuts lined up, we'd be more than happy to accommodate that.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission for the applicant? Okay, I see none. Thank you. With that, is there a motion on the commission to bring this item up? Commissioner Seymour,
Thank you. So moved.
is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Christopherson. Any discussion? Commissioner Gregor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to make a motion to along those sidewalks up with the curb cut. In part, it reduces the crossing distance and just makes the flow more intuitive for pedestrians. So that would be my reasoning.
Okay. So that is in the, let me check with our mover. Is that condition in your motion?
It could be.
Do you want it to be, or do we need to do an amendment?
No, I'm fine with that, yes.
Are you okay with that, Commissioner Christopherson?
I am.
Okay. So that is what's before us. Any other discussion? I see none, so we'll call the roll. Commissioner Prosnick?
Aye.
Christopherson?
Aye.
Seymour?
Aye.
Brenholt?
Aye.
Granlund?
Aye.
Gregor?
Aye.
Wolfgram?
Aye.
Obeyed?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. That item passes, and we move on to item number 6 for approval by the Plan Commission to approve a site plan for the Panda Express at 2403 London Road. Mr. Petrie.
Thank you again. As mentioned, 5 and 6 are kind of combined site plans, but reviewed individually. This is on the corner of Claremont Avenue and London Road, as noted. This site currently houses the Pillar Construction Office, currently zoned C3. The redevelopment of this site is for a single-story, 2,300 square foot Panda Express. The drive-through is shown on the screen. Has one lane for ordering, 1 lane for bypass, and the applicant is proposing a load zone, they're called, as described in the site plan. Typically in our ordinance, a load zone for a restaurant like this would be a 12 by 20 stall. The applicant is proposing a 20 by 118 feet along Claremont Avenue, so that would be the north side of the site. In our report, we believe that is unnecessary paving along Claremont Avenue and for the site. Panda Express is open typically 10:30 to, say, 10 o'clock in the evening. And due to the number of semi-truck traffic they will have, staff believes that that's unnecessary to have that much paving for a load zone for a fast food restaurant or casual restaurant as such. In our report and in our conditions, we do have that removed. In addition, they're showing the drive-up lane and the bypass lane to be wider than a typical lane. Typically, 10 feet is the for a lane. We also prefer to slow down traffic as you head in the drive-through. This commission can recommend that bypass lane to be removed as well. Some restaurants have them for pickup, for drive-up. In this situation, that bypass lane will just take you around the building and you'll be back to the entrance on London Road. So if this commission decides to remove that as well and only have 1 lane for ordering, that would be up to you this evening. In the report is noted the landscaping showing along the street frontages. They also are proposing bicycle parking. That bicycle parking is on the east end of the building off the patio, as you can see on this site plan. The dumpster enclosure is noted on the report to meet in compliance. On their sign plan, they are proposing a ground sign that's not shown on the site plan. That will be reviewed by a later date by staff. Again, with this site and the site to the south, they're proposing a CSM that will redo the lot lines. In your report is the elevations and floor plan showing the proposed restaurant. Again, they're doing the brick along the bottom and then the signs on the sides. Grading and drainage and utilities is noted. With this site plan, they are proposing a wider than 30-foot driveway onto London Road, as shown on the site plan. That will need an extra approval this evening because it's wider than 30 feet. You've seen those in the past. Again, there is no sidewalk along London Road to Claremont Avenue. That would take coordination with the state of Wisconsin DOT and the city of Eau Claire. Ms. Ness did talk to WisDOT today about that crossing, and it's not as easy as it should be, but Rads, this time we are proposing them just to have the sidewalk added to the front of the door, and Ms. Ness is here to answer any questions with that. The reason being is because to get pedestrians across at the intersection, there is a median in the way that would have to be moved back to allow for the crossing, is my understanding. There is some other conditions in the report as noted. And with that, I'd be standing for any questions this evening.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission for Mr. Petrie? I see none. Oh, wait. Granlund. Commissioner Granlund, go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think that we have found on other sites along the bypass and the Hastings that although it seems like the back of the lot, that there is the need for at least some approach to landscaping on what would be the third side. This is an odd-shaped parcel, and it is surrounded by a roadway on 3 sides, not just 2. I would suggest that not the same level of plantings, but some plantings be considered for that third frontage that they've got towards East Hastings on-ramp.
Okay.
That could be added as a condition. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Commissioner Gregor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to mention that Mr. Granlund mentioned too. I think in addition to, I guess we're not really. I guess this should be more phrased as a question, but would it be also possible to include, some landscaping that would include potentially even trees in that section of green space east of the building, between the drive-through and the building itself, and maybe that's another question for the applicant, based on what they feel their site plans need to be. But that would be sort of in addition to the landscaping that was mentioned earlier.
Yeah, the applicant
Okay.
can answer that question. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Any other questions for Mr. Petrie? Commissioner Christopherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Petrie, I'm wondering, in this project description, it talked about, excuse me, having some transit impact and that there might be some desire for transit passengers to be using this. Is there a location there for a transit stop or perhaps accommodating people?
I would have to defer that to Ms. Ness, the city engineer.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If you can give me a couple seconds, I'll see if I can find some transit information here.
Okay. In the meantime, are there any other questions? We'll come back to Ms. Ness. Okay. Oh, okay. Commissioner Christopherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had also made a note in the description. It talked about a 39-foot cut for, is did you receive information about why a wider curb cut was required for this restaurant?
We did not. Typical restaurants, hard to say how many deliveries they have with semi trailers. They're not open for breakfast typically. I have reviewed this site plan in a different city, and I don't remember that wide of a driveway. The applicant may want to clarify why is it so wide along the property line.
Ms. Ness?
It does look like there is a transit line that goes down Skeels Avenue at this time, and there is a bus stop that stops at London Road in Skeels, so approximately 2 blocks south of the proposed location, there is a transit access. Otherwise, it does not look like any of the existing routes go past on Claremont Avenue. There could be a change with the route that uses Fairfax to the north, but that would be something that would have to go through Transit Commission.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission for staff? All right. Thank you, Mr. Petrie. And is the applicant present online? If so, there should be a little icon for raising your hand. Do we know by name who the applicant would be?
The applicant is Atwell LLC on behalf of Panda Express.
Okay. Well, we don't know which of these folks. Wouldn't be Sean. Let me check with a couple of folks here. Oops, now what did I do? S-T-Y-C-K. Here we go. Here we go. Mr. Stick, are you the applicant for the Panda Express? Oh, he's on here twice. Mr. Stick, are you the applicant for the Panda Express?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. Welcome. Do you have anything to add to what staff had to say?
Figure out the little raise your hand icon, so I apologize for the delay.
That's okay. Do you have anything to add to what the staff had said?
No, I guess a couple items. The landscaping, we can certainly discuss with Panda and take a closer look on modifying or some correctly. There's the request for some added landscaping on the east side of the building, and then to address the 39-foot curb drive along London Road, basically the anticipated size of truck for deliveries, we run a truck turn analysis and size the radius of those drives based on that anticipated truck size, and so that 39-foot cut is a result of the radius that we've sized for that drive, access drive. So that's the reason for that question.
Okay. I think there were a couple other inquiries from the commission. Are there any questions for the applicant, Mr. Stick, from the commission? Commissioner Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question for the applicant would be related to the bike parking. I see that it's building, kind of actually behind the building from the users. So I was wondering if it would be possible to move that bike back to the west side of the building and accessible from London Road a bit more easily and more visible.
I think we can certainly relay that to Panda. I know we've got also on the line Dina McCowie with the architect. She may be able to answer that one. If there's any conflict or issue with relocating that to the west side of the room.
What was the name that you said had called in?
I believe, yeah, Dina McCowie, she's with the architect and also works with Public Express. She's on the call as well. I know typically this is for the Panda Express job that we've done in the past, this is typically where they put the bike parking
All right.
closer to the rear. And so this is fairly standard of how we have that prepared.
Okay. Commissioner Christopherson, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if you can respond to the questions about the bypass that goes around the restaurant and the size of the truck parking lane. Maybe some support to why that much concrete is necessary. It does seem to be overwhelming to that site to have the concrete.
Sure. So again, that loading zone was sized based on the anticipated truck size, and then again, ease of pulling in and out for delivery. And so we've relayed the staff report and staff's concerns to Panda Express, both the loading zone and reducing the size of the drive-through lane and bypass lane down to the 10-foot. And so they're aware of those concerns as well. If need to be made, but that's the original layout. That's what it was based on, was anticipated truck size for the truck delivery.
I'm sorry, I have a little bit of trouble understanding what you were saying, but I think what I got is that the size of the trucks are also being considered in that bypass route for their ease getting in and out. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Gregor, did you have another question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is about whether, it kind of goes back to that access onto London Road, the width of that driveway access. It seems that a truck could enter from Mall Drive and not have to worry about the turning movement. It would just be a matter of exiting, out of the London Road side. Is that?
Yeah, correct. So and actually that's how we've analyzed it. So there's existing median on London Road, so a southbound truck would have trouble making a left-hand turn. So we looked at this two ways where a truck would come from Mall Road or Mall Drive, can drive to the side and then return northbound on London Road, or a truck would be driving northbound on London Road, turn right into the site, and then back out Mall Drive. And so both those two analyses, whether it's the right turn out or the right turn in from London Road, is where we sized those radius for that drive, which came up with a 39-foot width at the property line.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the commission Ms. Ness, did you have comment?
I just wanted to say on previous site plans, we've had a condition of staff approval seeing the turning movements, and that might be something that would help address the driveway issue and then the width of the bypass lane and storage area as well.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? All right, I see none. Is there a motion among the commission to move this item?
Thank you, Chairperson. Motion to approve?
Okay, with conditions?
With conditions.
Yep. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Commissioner Seymour.
Just to be clear about the conditions, I think one of the added conditions is the addition of some landscaping things that we talked about on the east side.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of the conditions as recommended by staff.
Okay. Is that acceptable to you?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely acceptable, especially with
Okay.
what Ms. Ness said too about, looking into that turnaround and having staff being able to see that, so that's
All right.
what I want.
Good. So, Commissioner Gregor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with, having those conditions that the appreciate staff looking out for, opportunities to do too much paving. I do have a concern about the bike rack just being particularly visible in this location. Sometimes they're placed behind a building because the assumption is that mostly workers will use it, but I think it would be good to have it in front of the building. So perhaps it could be a friendly addition to the motion to include the bike rack moving to the west side of the building. Otherwise, I can do that as a separate amendment to the motion.
Okay. Does anyone, I could have missed the applicant addressing whether or not that's a problem for them. Otherwise, I'm going to check with them.
I thought they said that they would have to check with Panda on it or the architect unless they can chime in. That's what I thought I had heard about the bike rack being moved to the
Yeah.
front.
Okay. So is that additional condition acceptable to the mover and the seconder?
It's acceptable for me.
It's acceptable to me. I'm not sure if it's definitive, though, if they have to check with Panda and can they still reject it?
Yes, just a minute. Okay, Mr. Stick, you're still unmuted. Do you have any input on the movement of the bike rack?
I apologize, that's something I can't commit to, but I can certainly express, relay your concerns and bring your concerns to Panda Express and see if that's something they're willing to do if there's no reason that I'm not aware of. I just think that they wouldn't have any issues and we could comply with that because I understand
Okay.
the reasoning behind that to make that visible for the public so it can be accessed.
Okay.
So I don't know if that commitment to relay that with the intent is satisfactory or not. I don't know if they have any specific reason behind that location or not.
All right. Having heard that feedback from the engineer, is there any changes we would want to make to this additional condition? No. Okay. Commissioner Prosnick?
Motion to approve with conditions discussed.
Okay. And still second from Commissioner Seymour?
Yes, sir.
All right. Any other discussion? Commissioner Gregor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a note on the question earlier about transit access. I do serve on the Transit Commission and use the bus somewhat frequently, at least in colder months. And there's also Route 18, which is the Memorial bus route. That's on the north. It kind of goes over by Milwaukee Burger Company and the former Kmart area. So sometimes you could see some transit use.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any other discussion from the commission? All right. I see none. Let's call the roll. Commissioner Prosnick.
Aye.
Christofferson.
Aye.
Seymour.
Aye.
Brenholt.
Aye.
Granlund.
Aye.
Gregor.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolfgram.
Aye.
And Commissioner Obaid.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and that item passes. Item number 7 is public discussion for approval by Plan Commission of a site plan for 24-unit apartments at 3 different locations on Prairie Lane. Mr. Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Number 7 is located on the north side. This may look familiar to you because this commission approved the rezoning along with the city council back in May of this year. That was a general development plan and rezoning to allow for 3 buildings, 8 units each, as shown on the screen and site plan. This proposal, again, is 3 buildings, 8 units, a mixture of 2 and 3 bedroom units. Each of the units will have a 2-car garage. So each building will have 4 2 bedrooms and 4 3 bedrooms. The site plan has been changed a little since the general development plan. The applicant has moved the driveway to the east in between building 1 and 2. It used to be on the far west end. They moved that to allow for some buffering along North Crossing, is my understanding, and it was better access point for the potential people living in these apartments. At the discussion back in May, Plan Commission noted highway noise and buffering. The applicant is proposing 2 rows of evergreen plantings to about the middle of the site along North Crossing, in between the driveway around the building and the property line along North Crossing. And then it goes down to 1 row as you hit the middle of the site and head to the east. This staff recommends that the plantings occur after the paving is in along that, so the trees have ability to grow. Even though the construction of the buildings, they're doing that in phases as well. It is noted those are evergreen plantings. I did not get the type of plantings they are, but the Plan Commission can ask the applicant this evening to clarify the species of what the evergreen plantings would look like. Again, the site plan shows a 2-car garage for each. Guest parking and or visitor parking could be within the driveway, each having two cars in the driveway as well. This landscape plan does show the street trees along Prairie Lane and Jeffers Road, along with the North Crossing and foundation plantings. The lighting shall be wall packs, as noted in the report. There's currently no sidewalk along Prairie Lane or Jeffers Road. Jeffers Road is scheduled for reconstruction in 2022, which is 2 years out. They are showing a pedestrian connection to that potential sidewalk along Jeffers Road in the future. In your report is the grading and drainage, public utilities and transit, and traffic. There is some elevation shown on the screen and in your packet. This building has been built, first started in the south side of Eau Claire Prairie Park, Rooney's Properties built the first one of these, and they have rented very well and continue to be built throughout the Eau Claire area and Chippewa Valley area. The floor plans are noted in your report as well. This shown on the screen as well. With that, there's a few conditions that need to be met, and with that, I'd be standing for any questions this evening.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission for staff? I see none. Do we know which one would be the applicant? Oh, yep, there he is, raising his hand. Good evening, Mr. Bohan. Okay. Mr. Bohan, we're having a little trouble hearing you. In fact, we can't hear you at all. Can you try calling in on the phone? We're not hearing you at all, Sean. Can you try calling in on the phone? We'll stand by here for a minute. In the meantime, any questions for staff?
Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can hear you, Mr. Bohan. Go ahead.
All right, I apologize. This is Sean Bohan. All right, can you hear me better now? There's not an echo?
Yes.
Okay. I apologize. This is Sean Bohan with Advanced Engineering Concept. I'm here representing the developer. As Ryan had discussed, this has come before you guys for the general development plan back in May. And there are a couple of changes that we did end up making to address some concerns from the commission at that time. As Ryan had stated, we did end up relocating the access. We just pushed it to the east, basically about 150 feet. Helped out with some of the grades. And with that, it allowed us to actually move that drive aisle along the south. We actually moved it to the north and south so we could get some more room for the plantings for the double rows of evergreens that we were looking to do. So that was one change, and I know that there was concerns about noise and the protection, that type of thing. Another item that changed is where we're proposing our stormwater controls. We do end up having curb and gutter that's going to be on the outside of that drive aisle, and it'll go to one facility that's located along the western property line. That's allowed us, with the grades and stuff out there, it also allowed us to be able to preserve some of the trees that are existing that's actually at the southwest corner. So I don't know if any of the commission members have kind of driven through this area and kind of looked at it, but there are established older trees and stuff that are along that southwest corner that I think will really help protect that first building further to the west. Other than that, we don't have any objections to the conditions that have been placed on this project. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the commission? Looks like we don't have any. Thank you. Is there a motion to bring this item up? Commissioner Seymour.
Thank you. So moved with staff recommendations.
And is Commissioner Christopherson.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? I see none. So we will call the roll. Commissioner Prosnick.
Aye.
Christopherson.
Aye.
Seymour.
Aye.
Brenholt.
Aye.
Granlund.
Aye.
Gregor.
Aye.
Wolfgram.
Aye.
Obeyed.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. That item passes, and we move on to item number 8, which is public discussion for approval by Plan Commission for a site plan for a 30-unit apartments at Gateway Drive and Odison Lane. All right, Mr. Allen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Again, this is a request for approval of a site plan for 30 units in total, but 3 10-unit apartments located number 8 here, southeast portion of the city, the extension of Gateway Drive as it reaches Otter Creek. Shows the kind of pie-shaped portion here, triangular portion, the north end of the project currently underway, Gateway Apartments at northeast corner of Hamilton and Gateway Drive. Again, this is further to the north, nearer to Odison Lane, and up against Otter Creek in this area. So we tip the site on its side for ease of viewing here. North now is to the left, south then to the right, east to the top of the screen, and west to the bottom. You can see Gateway Drive there, the bottom left corner, or bottom right corner, excuse me, extending to the left, which is running from south to north, and an extension into the proposed site before you this evening. Again, the applicant here is also Advanced Engineering Concepts here on behalf of the owner, Wurzer Builders. And again, they're requesting approval of a site plan for these 3 10-unit apartment buildings. Applicant did provide a narrative, site plan, and some building elevations. Zoning of the property is R3P. Lot size is plus or minus 5.7 acres with phase 1, which is further to the south, 9.63 acres, phase 2, and then here before you, phase 3, 3.7 acres. In some previous approvals, you may have seen this in just 2 phases, and this was listed as phase 2. Applicant has broken, as noted, the first phase into 2 separate phases, and now this before you here is a 3rd phase. So if you're reviewing some past approvals and such, you may have seen this portion identified as phase 2. It is now phase 3. Just to clarify that. The density for phase 3 is 8.1 units per acre, which all in all does reduce the overall density of the development from the original 15.1 acres or units per acre, so 15.1 units per acre to 11.4 units per acre. So that is a consideration as well as we look at the site plan as a whole, but also this phase in particular. The proposed site plan, again, is for these 3 10-unit apartments, with the buildings being similar to those immediately adjacent to the south under construction for phase 2. The phase 2 were primarily 8-unit apartments, so these are a little bit larger. The narrative as provided by the applicant states that these would consist of 8 2-bedroom units and 2 1-bedroom units. Each of the 2-bedroom units would have an attached 2-car garage, and each 1-bedroom unit would have an attached one-car garage. Jump ahead here to the elevations. Here, this shows what's being proposed, again, a little bit larger scale, naturally, than the 8 units immediately to the south. The parking requirement is 54, with the 54 attached garage stalls proposed, plus 54 driveway stalls are included as well. As with similar developments, the Plan Commission have not counted the driveway stalls in the past. Under the current provisions of the code, bicycle parking is allowed within the garages for the units. No exterior bicycle parking is identified specific to this proposal. Open space, jump back here. This shows some of the drainage and the topography. Open space is noted as 31.8% of the lot. That does exclude the playground and sports court or recreation area. See, there's kind of to the middle to the bottom, which that was included in phase 2 of the development. A landscape plan again shows street trees, foundation plantings, evergreen plantings, primarily along the west side there of that extended Gateway Drive. Staff is recommending that the proposed pedestrian connection from the public sidewalk along Gateway Drive be further separated from the main drive aisle with 5-foot landscape boulevard. So you see the landscape boulevard of the extension of Gateway Drive, and then with the trees placed there, and then the sidewalk. But as you get interior then immediately into the site, that main drive aisle on the left-hand side, so to the north, shows a sidewalk immediately adjacent to that main drive aisle, which really is going to act much like a street frontage accessing the garages. So that's just a recommendation to pull that further back and provide some additional separation for that pedestrian connection. Since this is really the only, thank you, Ryan, that's the only real main pedestrian connection from this phase down along Gateway Drive. That's kind of the focus of that request or recommendation. The building elevations, again, reflect similar design scale as the previously approved 8-unit buildings immediately adjacent to the south. But did want to note that in reviewing the multifamily housing design manual, a couple of considerations presented to you here this evening based on staff's review of building orientation, and then the catch-all other design considerations in the multifamily housing design manual. But looking through those suggests that the northernmost building, see a little bit better here, so the one to the left here, should consider an alternative design that would reorient the building, so all the garages, which are on the ends of the buildings, as you can see here, all the garages would face to the interior or the south of this phase. Thank you. Since Gateway Drive is unlikely to extend further north from what you see here due to topography and woods, and a creek, and municipal boundaries, a number of reasons, lack of right-of-way. So because it's not looking to extend further north, again, essentially leaving that interior drive aisle essentially like the terminus of the street, so still acting like a street there, it makes sense to consider seeing that northern building reoriented so you see garages facing that street. Again, like you see with those 2 buildings to the right. Again, not all the driveways or all the garages are facing there, but half on the north are facing that interior drive, that furthest terminus of this Gateway Drive essentially. And the other half on those southern 2 buildings are facing the other drive in phase 2. So as you can see to the right there, you see all the garages essentially facing that drive lane. But then now on the north, that last building is oriented so that isn't happening. And that 2 additional drive lanes have to occur on the east and west sides of the building. So again, the current building configuration again, not in any kind of negative term, but again, kind of cookie-cuttered through there, repeating that same design doesn't allow for that garage orientation as noted. So some other design one that's not been presented up to this point would have to be considered. So again, staff is recommending that Building 3, is how it's noted, have a front-facing orientation. This would also reduce that paving, again, from that east and west sides. Provide more views of the northern open space to more residents of the building rather than just essentially the half that happen to be on that north side. You'd have a lot more units that be facing that direction. And then also it would encourage a more pedestrian-oriented character to the development, again, removing a lot of that paving. And as you see there on the top, so the farther east side, it's simply a lot of striping that's providing that pedestrian connection, and then an unimproved trail loop at the north end. So again, such redesign will also promote more front-facing windows, and I didn't include a drawing of the 8-unit buildings and other phases, but you can see here, again, with, especially at the top, you just see you see a lot of windows, a couple doors, and then when you have the garages on the ends, those ends do not have really any other kind of front entry porches. So redesigning this and realigning it, reorienting it would provide some additional options, much like the 8 units to the south. So again, density, overall site design, all meeting the standards of the multifamily housing design manual. But again, under building orientation and some other design considerations, staff's recommending that Building 3 be redesigned and reoriented, as noted, again, to make it more of that front facing to that street, kind of that final street network here, rather than just simply twisted 90 degrees like the other buildings. So with that, not to belabor that, but wanted to kind of talk through the kind of the rationale, especially again based on the multifamily housing design manual for reconsidering Building 3. Other items provided by engineering include grading and drainage. Again, a condition related to the stormwater management on site needing to be approved. Public utilities are available. I don't have that as a slide here, but there are utilities available as extended and throughout, related particularly to the other phases. Traffic being the same, again, just 30 additional units here, reduce the density from previous approvals. So again, traffic and such are less impacted than previously considered. And with that, again, at Hamilton and Gateway, there's some additional opportunities for transit and access to that. And again, hence the importance to make sure that pedestrian walkway is fully separated and improved from start to finish throughout the project. So with that, again, the applicant has included a narrative and other plans. Don't think I have, again, I've got the drainage, and this also shows the landscaping, other utility plans and other plans submitted as well. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. I'm going to start with a question this time.
All right.
So if during our discussion the Plan Commission decides that they agree with you that that building should be reoriented and redesigned, that's a pretty significant change to the plan here. Would you recommend then that we ask them to come back with another updated drawing?
That's one option. It's at your discretion. Again, we did include that as condition number 3, that an alternative design for Building 3 be submitted, and we did say approved administratively. So
okay.
we kind of started with that, so it could be less onerous on the applicant. Again, this was brought to their attention earlier on, so it's not, it shouldn't be new or unusual.
Okay.
In terms of hearing that here tonight. So this is not necessarily a surprise to them. And again, it's at the Plan Commission's discretion. If you're,
all right.
That's why I wanted to explain it in great detail, is that that's the thinking behind it. And if that general concept is agreeable, as noted, you know, the 8-unit buildings, I apologize, I should have shown that as an example. In terms of scale, those front windows and such, we're generally agreeable in terms of design. So something in that general variety, but with, again, the garages facing to the front. And again, it's not anything that we haven't seen elsewhere throughout the city. It's just not something that's been presented in this project yet.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Granlund.
Thank you. I don't believe there's room to get that building rotated without doing a lot of extra paving as well to get past the building and around to the second set of garages. I think it would be very, very unlikely to fit a reoriented building in among the change in topography without, once again, you'd be trading a single lane in one place for a double lane in another. And I think you'd probably lose the trail loop as a result and lose some of the open space. I don't really see it as an advantage to rotate the building from its current orientation. If the design team were to offer something else, I think that'd be fine. If the administrative team would approve a change, but I don't see it as very likely that another option would fit better.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Granlund.
Yes.
No, certainly, yeah, staff is certainly not, wouldn't recommend turning the existing building as proposed 90 degrees. Absolutely agree that there'd be likely a lot more paving in that regard. Simply looking at redesigning the building and making all 10 units face the single direction. And again, that may exactly bring up other potential issues in terms of if the building then were to be longer, would there be other impacts to topography? Would the design be less aesthetically pleasing because you'd have 10 units all in a row rather than kind of scattered in a kind of a cube form rather than just all kind of in a line, for lack of a better term. So yeah, certainly there would be other considerations that would have to be brought to mind, but yeah, not reorient the existing building as proposed, but simply redesign it to be something different. So just want to clarify that.
Anything to add, Commissioner Granlund? Okay, I guess not. Anybody else have questions? All right, we'll move on to the applicant.
Should be also Mr. Boyan.
Yep. Oops. Uh-oh. Oh, yeah, he was user number 9. Mr. Bohan, do I have you?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
I can. Anything to discuss? Anything to add?
Yes. I mean, again, this is Sean Bohan with Advanced Engineering. We don't have an issue with number 1 and number 2 of the conditions by staff. One of them dealing with pedestrian connection, moving it off the drive aisle 5 feet, provide a little bit of green space. Also about the drainage calculations. But we do end up having some concerns, just trying to end up either modifying the building or as the fellow commissioner had spoken about trying to actually turn the building. He was correct in the fact that we just wouldn't have the room if you end up looking at the grading plan, which is up in front of you. We do end up having a ravine that's in the north and stuff, so we won't be able to take that same building and try to rotate it at all. And it seems like staff recognizes that also. And we are trying to preserve the greatest amount of open space and usable space in the north. We have an unimproved trail that's there. The developer and applicant, is looking at possibly doing other improvements and stuff up there. They just want to make sure that it's usable for everyone for the entire development. I feel that we have good access to that. We end up having a fire lane that ends up basically going along the eastern property line. That it's actually within phase 2. We continue that into phase 3. And that's where you see the striping along that eastern property line, and then we continue that
out to that northern section and everything. So we think that we have a very good access to the rest of the development. And again, we also have a top lot, and, sports court and everything that's showing, on the western side. We did end up, we've had a couple, kicks at the can on this, phase 3. And it is a little bit different, I think, than what you guys had seen for the general development plan. There's a few more units and stuff, and then we came back and we brought in something else to staff and kind of talked to them a little bit about providing a different types of units and everything, but it didn't seem like it was totally compatible maybe with what was already there with the 8 units that have detached garages in the very south to the 8 units that are just south of this that end up having the attached garages. And then these 10 plexes are very similar to those, a little bit bigger, end up having a little bit more parking just because we're end up having the 10 units instead of the 8. So we really like the style of this. We think that trying to throw in, something that would be totally different seems like it would just if someone came into it, it's like everything is kind of flowing pretty decent, then all of a sudden you have one building that's, somewhat of an oddball by trying to end up front packing and having the parking up front and then everything with window views and stuff in the back. It just seems like just only having one of those buildings would be, something that just seemed like we just tried to end up packing in there and fitting it in there rather than really trying to have the continuity and stuff of what we were kind of going for. So that's the area that we definitely like to end up kind of discussing. We feel that the building is definitely separated enough off of that front entranceway. So that northernmost building has about 45 feet of green space before the drive aisles and before the parking for those other 2 10 plexes that are rotated 90 degrees. So we feel that it's certainly more than enough green space and separation. If it's something that we end up doing some added plantings, we certainly could end up doing that. But we hope that we end up having your support of trying to keep this the way that we end up having it shown. And then I'll just be here for answering any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission for Mr. Bohan? I see no questions. Thank you, Mr. Bohan.
Thank
you. Wait, Commissioner Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I did have a question that just kind of popped into my mind here for Mr. Bohan, if he's still available.
Are you still there, Mr. Bohan?
The top lot for the little playground area and such. I'm talking for this site. Is there going to be some sort of fence or something or buffer between that recreation space and the parking or the driveway, I should say?
Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
You are ready to go.
We certainly can push it back. We just took a footprint from some other developments and top lots, but we certainly have some room where we could end up. I think right now it's probably maybe 5 or 7 feet off of the edge of that pavement. We certainly could end up moving it to the north and get it further away, both that and the sports court.
Okay. Yeah, it just seems like it's kind of close to that driveway there, and so just I guess be cognizant of that as you will be, I'm sure.
All right. Any other questions from the commission for Mr. Bohan? Okay, I see none. Is there a motion? We'll open it up to anybody who wants to make a motion, whether you're in the room or not.
Thank you. I'll make a motion just to get the conversation started.
Okay. So is your motion with all the staff recommendations at this point?
Yes, at this point, yes.
All right.
Mr.
Commissioner
Chairman, I
Christopherson.
will second.
All right, Mr. Christopherson. Any discussion? Commissioner Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure how much I really like these style of buildings in general, but I think it's just kind of a personal preference. But I do see the point as to why this was designed the way it is. In terms of laying out that building 3 in particular, that has been the point of discussion here. So I could see myself supporting it the way it is. There may be some, this is showing like some okay pedestrian connectivity, or at least there's that is good about this versus if you had pavement like the full length of the building facing the other buildings. But yeah, it's just, this style of building is just not that conducive to being, having good pedestrian connectivity or necessarily really respecting like the full landscape around it. But I think that overall this is probably the best way these types of buildings could be laid out in this area. So that's just kind of where I'm at right now, but I'm happy to listen to other perspectives.
Thank you. Any other discussion from the commission? Okay. So we have a motion before us to approve with staff recommendations. And we will call the roll. Commissioner Prosnick.
Aye.
Christopherson.
Aye.
Seymour.
Aye.
Brenholt.
Aye.
Granlund.
Aye.
Gregor.
Aye.
Wolfgram.
Aye.
Obaid. Commissioner Obaid.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. So item number 8 passes. And we are on to item number 9, which is a public discussion for approval by the Plan Commission to approve an amendment to relocate the proposed pylon sign at the Quick Trip 222 Water Street. Mr. Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before you, as mentioned, 222 Water Street, located on number 9 shown on the map. Quick Trip is taking the east part of the building that was built and improved by this commission 3 years ago. With that approval was a sign plan for the multi-tenant building. In your packet is noted the original sign plan along with this pylon sign. Along with this approval, you approved the wall signs as shown, up to 10 tenants potentially. The Quick Trip is taking the east half of the building, or east portion of the building. The proposal for the pylon sign was on the corner of 3rd Avenue and Water Street. That was never constructed. The same proposal, the same size, the same design, same height is proposed to be relocated east inside the parking lot as shown on the screen and in your packet. I did try to do a zoom in aerial or zoomed in site plan of that. They're proposing to remove 2 stalls, put in some landscaping with mulch, with shrubs, and then move the sign to that location rather than on 3rd and Water. The purpose of a sign plan is to provide information on sign design and size and location. The reason why this is brought back to you as an amendment is because the original location as approved in 2018, again, was on the 3rd Avenue and Water Street side. Now they're relocating it to this location. Currently, there is a few signs located on the building. There is no ground sign at this time. Some of the tenants don't even have wall signage. They have window signage. They would be allowed additional wall signage if the tenants wanted to. With the proposal in front of you too, here's showing where that location would be. Pretty much where the black car is located, that stall would be removed for the additional pole sign to be located there. Vehicles would not get that close to it as shown on the zoomed in. The pole height is 25 feet tall, and the clearance, I believe, is 10 feet shown on the proposal. So a vehicle will not be able to get that close to it now if they do enter the site, and they could technically hit the pole sign, but they would not hit the cabinet part of it. They would have to actually hit the pole. And Google Street View shows that site and where they're leasing the eastern part of the building. In your packet was the original approval with the sign types. All the signs will be reviewed as proposed as Quick Trip. They are proposing 2 wall signs in addition with a projecting sign for the customers to see where they're located. With that, the applicant did provide a narrative explaining the situation, explaining why Quick Trip would like the sign. Now, this location is not allowed to have gas per the Water Street commercial design standards and plan. So this is just a convenience store, grocery store for the customers and for the Randall Park Neighborhood Association or neighborhood area. And with that, the approval tonight would be for that sign to be relocated in the parking lot as shown on the site plan. With that, I'd be standing for any questions this evening.
Okay, any questions from the commission for staff? I see none. And so I will check with caller number 3. Are you here to, as the applicant? If you're calling in on a landline, did you call in for this item?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you to the commission chair and members. Again, yes, we just want to move the pylon sign. It was originally supposed to be on the other end by the MO Bank. The new location, as he said, would be on the east side of the Quick Trip store. The reason is basically that the sign was not installed originally, so electrical wasn't run to that area, and it would now disturb DMO Bank's parking lot and traffic flow. So Quick Trip is proposing to put the sign in their parking lot on their end of the building, as that has not been done yet, and they could run conduit for the electrical and install the sign footing without interruption.
Okay, can I get your name, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, Cindy Bluffkey.
Oh, okay.
Lacrosse Sign Group, representing Quick Trip.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the commission for Ms. Blusky? Commissioner Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Blusky, I understand this is just about the sign, but I see some changes to the parking lot in addition to the sign compared to where we're at right now. I'm not sure if that can be spoken to by anyone on the call here, and maybe it's more of a staff question, but right now I just see like one row of parking where I see the sign located, and then I guess on page 71 of our packet, I see, cars parked along the side of the building. I guess I'm not sure what I'm looking at here. I feel like this is a bigger change than there's also a trash enclosure sort of north end of the lot. None of that is existing right now, so I'm just trying to figure out, we're just approving sign location here, but there's just a lot more on these maps that we're seeing. So I'm not sure if you can clarify any of that.
Mr. Petrie.
Yeah, excellent question. So this site, the striping was only done on one row. My understanding is Quick Trip's going to stripe the additional row and do site improvements such as dumpster enclosure, as you noted. But this evening, you're not reviewing that. It's a good question, but they have not striped the additional row to the west, and there will be no parking along the building. That's for deliveries only, delivery zone, similar to Panda Express delivery zone, but this one just in the drive aisle. So that site is significantly changing. It's all completely fenced in, and Quick Trip will be digging up that parking lot as mentioned by the applicant. They'll have to run electrical to the site, and so that parking lot will be ripped up. At least a line of it will be, and then they'll restripe. And I'll confirm with Quick Trip they are going to pave as shown and stripe as shown on this site plan that was submitted as part of the building permit as well.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner Gregor?
I'm trying to figure out whether this is if that any of that's going to be coming back to the Plan Commission or is it all staff approved?
That was all, good question. That was all approved in 2017 with the site plan. My understanding, the current owner just striped the parking lot temporarily with the understanding that this tenant space would be leased by somebody. At that time, it was a different tenant. Now, Quick Trip is going to go forward with this. That was approved in 2017 by this commission along with the city council.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant? I see none. Thank you, Ms. Blusky. Blusky, I'm sorry. All right. Do we have a motion to approve this item?
Thank you, Chairman. Motion to approve.
Commissioner Prosnick.
Second.
Commissioner Seymour. Thank you. Any discussion? I see none, so we'll call the roll. Commissioner Prosnick.
Aye.
Christofferson.
Aye.
Seymour.
Aye.
Brenholt.
Aye.
Granlund.
Aye.
Gregor.
Aye.
Wolfgram.
Aye.
Obeyed.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. So the item number 9 passes. And our next item is just future agenda items. Are there any future agenda items? Mr. Allen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, as noted earlier and previously, the Monday, July 6th meeting, we do not have any agenda items, so we anticipate, therefore, that would be heretofore canceled. And
Okay.
happy Independence Day.
Yeah.
To everyone. And our next meeting then for the commission would be July 20th. Right now, we anticipate, at the very least, for a discussion item, giving an update from staff on the comprehensive plan review, kind of status of where we're at with that. And I'm sure there'll be other applications anticipated for that meeting as well. But for now, July 6th. De facto canceled, and look forward to seeing everybody on the 20th of July.
Okay. Thank you. Any other future agenda items? If not, without objection, this meeting is adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the City of Eau Claire. A transcript of this meeting is available for the hearing impaired. It will be available within 7 days of this telecast. call 715-839-4912 or TDD 715-839-1689 or write Eau Claire City Clerk, P.O. Box 5148, Eau Claire, Wisconsin 54702-5148. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.